Greetings and welcome to another Grenfell MediaWatch update. Today's edition I simply want to call Don't Fall Asleep. And yes, it's a slight nod to Nightmare on Elm Street. Now I'm going to start with the tragic news of Todd Brassener. Now in the case of Todd Brassener, the 67-year-old who perished in Trump Towers over the weekend, has much resonance over here in the UK. Much of that is because he belongs to a special class of people, and that is those who believe that paying for things like fire sprinklers, let alone cladding that is non-flammable, is actually an expensive waste of money. So let's bring this to the UK, a bit closer to home, and talk about Arconic. Now over the last couple of weeks we've heard many reports about the fact that Arconic knew as early as 2015, we now have it confirmed, that the components that they provided for the cladding was flammable. Some of the components, and I think it's quite a complex story here, there were two parts of Arconic materials that were used. Some of it was classified B in fire safety regulations, but other parts of it was classified as E, which is the lowest level of fire safetiness that building components can be. So what we can deduce from what was reporting into Arconic is that as back as 2015, if Arconic, as it seems to be, published the fact that the cladding components that they provided were, well, basically E-grade, then they knew the material was unsafe, and the decision was made nonetheless to save money. And they again belong to that special class of people, as does the current President of the United States of America does. It makes me think about what's happening in my own borough, Hackney. Now there was a promise by the council to actually publish its report into the state of cladding across the borough, and some bureaucrat actually reversed the decision. Now it's really annoying because you see the initial release of that report led to a couple of estates in the region actually having the cladding removed to make the residents safe. Anyway, I don't know about you, but I started to get the clear idea that it's financial considerations that are being placed above the welfare of the residents. And perhaps that would explain why out of the 160 social housing stock in the UK that has been found to have flammable cladding and dangerous cladding, only 7 have had the cladding removed. In fact, there's a Labour MP, I think the Shadow Minister for Housing, he says that by their calculations, at the rate that this current government is replacing cladding or financing and giving support to the replacement of cladding, it'll be 15 years before everyone in social housing is made safe. All I can say about that is perhaps the political party that decides to place that in their manifesto has more chance of getting public support than those that actually decide to maintain the status quo, which saw 72 plus people perish in the middle of the night. Anyway, before I get drenched, it's starting to rain again and I don't have my umbrella. What else is going on? Well, there was some good news of sorts anyway. We know that the fraudster who claimed some £19,000 by pretending that she had lost family inside the Grenfell massacre has actually been jailed for 4.5 years. But as a MediaWatch group would say, note the headline. Despite the fact that she didn't actually live in Kensington, let alone Grenfell, note the way it conflates fraud with Grenfell. And this is a trick that's been continued not only by the gutter press and the tabloids, I'm talking about also the broadsheets that pretend to be mature papers. Now the Times newspaper is another that continues to keep this masquerade going, and what you'll probably notice is that they give a level of scrutiny to the 504 core participants that come from the bereaved, the survivors and the residents, that they don't give to the 20-odd organisational core participants. In fact, I'm starting to think that I shouldn't even refer to them as core participants. They're just participants because the core really is just Morbic. The rest of them don't seem to have any elevated status other than really for PR use. Oh, and another reason why I think that the term core participant is a huge misnomer, because some of the key players aren't even core participants. Look at Kingspan. They haven't even provided a position statement because they are not a core participant. They've got a very interesting legal strategy, whereas by not becoming a core participant, they feel, or perhaps they feel, they can avoid scrutiny. It seems to be working so far. They've just issued statements about, well, what to do next post-Grenfell. I don't think that washes when we know that some of their components were used in refurbishment. Anyway, as a group, we scrutinised the procedural hearing, and Morbic can really announce that looking into the potential health on the effects of the fire on those who actually escaped on that day are outside the terms of reference of the inquiry. And that's exactly what he did during the procedural hearing, or in response to some of the comments that were raised by representation. Then exactly who is this inquiry for? Perhaps this explains why so many media failed to update the 71 death toll number given to them by the police to 72, despite the clear evidence. Because the terms of reference don't cover the likes of Pilly, who never left the hospital after the massacre, who suffered from extreme burns as a result of the fire. If the inquiry doesn't cover her passing, her death, then whose does it? Anyway, as far as I'm concerned, this makes it really clear why there needs to be a continued movement, why we mustn't fall asleep, why it's important to stay woke. I mean, look, I was looking at the Twitter page of the Grenfell support team, and some of the work they're doing is really lovely. They've got some cool projects that are, and I'm being very sincere here, that are really reflecting the needs of the diverse community in that area. But it doesn't mask the fact that some 78 people are still living in emergency accommodation, and really we're looking at 145 households who are living in temporary accommodation. I mean, I say 145 households. We're not talking about families of one here. So there's still a whole load of work to be done. So where does it take us now? And yes, I am getting drenched. Well, Claire O'Shea, I think I pronounced her name correctly. She's a mother in Thanet who's actually organising a silent march or silent walk in solidarity. And you've got to big her up for that. The movement is growing, even though we're not hearing much about it in the media as they're moving into this election phase. Anyway, before I get completely drenched, and of course this camera stops working because electronics and water don't really mix, I want to say that this Saturday is the 14th of April, which means of course it's the silent walk. And this month there are some reasonable calls for a silent sit down before the walk at Kensington Church Street. Now this has been called in the spirit of Martin Luther King's anniversary of his assassination, which took place last week. And all I really want to say to everyone is, feel free to use any tactic at your disposal as long as it's done in the spirit of love, in the spirit of justice, and in total solidarity and total respect of the bereaved, the survivors, and the residents who are all affected. Because I've got a feeling that Morbic doesn't have that as the conditions of his inquiry. Anyway, before I start rambling, and I'm not dribbling, it really is rain. May the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.